You're just saying that because you know that people are going to agree with it.
Adam, did you see the big leaks over the last few days? We saw the Insomniac leak, yes, with Wolverine and all the games that were coming out from this, and it all started with the hackers, and they said, "Look, you got 7 days to pay us $2 million, and if you don't pay us $2 million, we're going to leak all this information." You saw all that?
Wow, no, I just saw the Wolverine. I really like Wolverine a lot. I had a bunch, like my comic book collection was very small as a kid, but they were mostly Wolverine comic books, and so I don't like Insomniac style games like Spider-Man. I just never, that wasn't my thing. But Wolverine, I'm like, all right, maybe but holy shit, does it look boring? But anyway, that's all I saw was just that clip.
Well, it's still like
I didn't know any of this. $2 million. They're wow.
Right. So the Wolverine game's still like 2 years out from being released, right?
Okay.
Which is why it looked, pretty raw. It's like a beta version of the game, not even an alpha, or not even an alpha, not even a beta. But so the whole story here was that there was a more or less ransomware group that kind of came in. They hacked the servers at Insomniac and Sony, and they had about 1.8 terabytes worth of game assets and all sorts of information. It was like 1.3 million files or something like that, including a playable version of the Wolverine that you saw, a playable build.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
That's where that footage was coming from. So this group came in and they're like, "Look, you need to pay us $2 million in 7 days. Otherwise, we're going to release it." Now, here's the problem with that is inside those 1 whatever million files was also some like passport information and personal information from the employees at Insomniac. So the 7 days pass, and that's how the leak happened, right? And whether it's a leak, whether it's a hack, the information is out there, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, and at the end of the day, that's how most leaks are. Most leaks are done through somebody infiltrating some information that previously was behind some sort of safeguard most of the time. So that's where the kind of the wrinkle to this whole story comes into play, is that people's personal information is involved. And I think it's worth talking about this information without going into details and showing their data, right? You don't want to show people's passports and stuff. That's the last thing you want to do. But I still think that you can absolutely still talk about the video games and all the other information that doesn't have to deal with those people. And I think it's totally fair game, right? So what you saw yesterday after this was people who were saying, specifically in the game journalist space, they were out there saying like, "No, you absolutely shouldn't do this because this is a criminal act. This is a leak and people's lives are affected by this." And it was just like line up the game's journalist and, it's kind of like the usual suspects. Now, look, I haven't talked to Greg Miller in a long time. It's been several years. I wouldn't say I know Greg at all anymore. But it's fair to say I don't agree with anything that he says in this video, and he's pretty much getting roasted on it. They started their show yesterday talking about how they're not going to discuss this because, but they're going to discuss how the leak affects people working on your favorite games instead of the actual leaks themselves, right?
Okay.
And he kind of opened his show and he talked about it, and their show is very much been downvoted because they're kind of getting on their white knight horse and riding in and being like, "We're not going to talk about this because it has nothing to do with things." While still, what you see is look, I've said this many, many times. Everybody's a little bit of a hypocrite. Everybody has hypocritical nature to them, but
sure,
most people just don't get on their grandstand and do it like games journalist does. As here is him not too long ago.
Number one, the continuing saga of Grand Theft Auto 6. If you were under a rock all weekend, maybe offline, maybe you missed it, Grand Theft Auto 6 did in fact leak a whole bunch of footage from it, a whole bunch of information.
So here he is talking about GTA 6 leak, right?
Of course.
This is not something that is abnormal in this situation, right? Where it's kind of like rules for thee, not for me. But you can continue here, and you have this guy, Patrick Wren, who is a senior encounter designer for Respawn, right? And this guy's like, "Oh, shame on IGN and Kotaku and Polygon today, talking about these leaks. your clicks aren't worth people's livelihoods. And you see people like grandstanding in a situation like this. And you see Naomi Kyle. She's been around for a long time. Stop reporting on leaks. But as you scroll down, here she is once again talking about the leaks in Destiny or the Harry Potter game leaks. Like this is literally her job.
Right.
And you see this continuously, and the absolute just white knight savior complex of these people.
I mean, the leaks are out. So if you don't report on it, someone else will. It's gonna be reported on because gamers like want to know about the games that are coming out. That's just a fact, right? You can't stop the tide of the internet, right?
Right.
That's what they're trying to say. Like, stop being, human beings. Like curious about, something you're passionate about. Oh, there's information out there. People are gonna freaking want to know about it. That's just the way it is.
100%. And that's the idea of like, just the idea of puffing out your chest and be like, we're not going to do this because we know better, right? We know better than you. And it's like, you're not doing your job by not reporting on the games in this.
Exactly.
I understand wanting to take a specific angle. Like if you want to talk about how this affects people's lives, sure, absolutely, go right ahead. But the idea that you don't want to talk about the content of what's in these leaks and the development calendar I think it was 4 or 5 games that were coming up until they had the entire thing mapped out until 2030, right?
Wow.
So you should absolutely talk about this. This is imperative gaming news.
Right.
And then you saw, people who are, who I feel are saying the right thing. Says, is it my imagination or did like every outlet gleefully cover all the stuff, all the past leaks that were crimes like Capcom or GTA stuff, but now suddenly some of those same outlets are taking a moral stand regarding the Insomniac leaks by not covering. Interesting. What changed? Right. And
that's a good question.
Right. And you see like Colts, he's been on the show. He's like, this is the media bias we've been talking about. Absolutely double standard when it comes to PlayStation, which, Greg he has a really popular PlayStation podcast. I think it's called PS I Love You, I believe. Right. Like that's the thing. And
that's a good title. That's a good name.
Yeah. He's Greg's
never
awesome.
heard of it, but that's good. PS I Love You. It's a PlayStation, but yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Greg is phenomenal at branding for sure. And like I said, Greg's genuinely a really, really smart dude. He's always been genuinely cordial to me, but that doesn't mean I can't be critical of him,
So is Insomniac work with Sony? Because most of their games are Sony exclusive.
They're owned. I think they're owned by Sony.
Owned by Sony. Okay.
Yes.
So it's because Sony doesn't like the leaks, but
Right.
Rockstar leaks aren't as big as Rockstar is not as big as Sony, or is that even the case? I feel like Rockstar is kind of a big player now.
Right.
They make billions and billions. It
just comes down to, are you excited for this game? Do you have a personal connection to this game? Maybe you know people. And that's where I wanted to go next with this. We've had David Jaffe on our show before, and I don't agree with a lot of the things that David Jaffe says, but just because we don't agree on everything doesn't mean we can't agree on some things. And this is where I wanted to go to David Jaffe with his Twitter post, as well as a section from his podcast. He says, as a human and former game dev who lied and busted our asses to keep shit secret, I feel for the devs 100%. But game sites, and I know many gamers will be surprised to read this, given how so many of the sites act like game biz PR, answers to the gamers, aka the customers, and the customers click on this stuff and are happy to hear about it. Even when I was a dev, I was always surprised how much game fans and game journalists seem to bend over backwards and treat the game makers with kid gloves. Hard to think of many other industries that do this. I mean, do you think if the plans for the next 5 years of Tesla leaked and aren't out in the world, no one should report on it? Do you think if there's a trade in a baseball team that hasn't been announced yet, but the press learns about the subject, that the sports press should not report on it? This isn't Watergate or WikiLeaks. The public doesn't need to know this info for the public good. But if it's out there and it's not illegal to report on it, it's foolish to blame the press for running on the story.
Facts.
And like I said, it's one of these things where it's like, you know, it's interesting to hear his perspective as a former game developer. And I actually DM'd him. I was like, man, you know, like we don't agree on a lot, but you know, I really appreciate your take on this.
Yeah, I'm the same way. That's exactly what I was basically saying. It's just like the information's out there. What?
Right.
And he makes a good point. It's not illegal to report on the information that's already out. Yeah, like exposing employees, like that's terrible. Like the hackers should definitely like that's insane, right? They didn't just take game files and like show, look, this is what we got, which is also illegal, right? I mean, but it becomes a much worse situation when they're exposing like real people and you know, potentially ruining their lives if people use that information for bad.
Right. What was interesting is, you know, David Jaffe has his own podcast, and he actually had Adam Sessler on yesterday. And I wanted to listen. And Adam is crazy. Like he is he's gone on out of his way many, many times. He's like, I hate game journalists. I hate, you know, I'm not a, you know, he's really gone out of his way to really distance himself from his time in the games industry. Right. Mm-hmm. And apparently he's done very well for himself. But I wanted to take 1 minute from this podcast as they're talking about this. And I was listening to this and I was like, what is happening in this world where I'm like, oh, okay, Adam Sessler makes all sorts of sense right now. So wow. Let's just kind of take a listen here and see what they're talking about, because I think it's worth it.
You know, people are like, this is bad and the team hurts and it's bad for the company and all this. So I'm going, okay, this is Warner Brothers who's charging $10 a fucking skin for Mortal Kombat. It's like and you guys who are professional journalists, yeah, you need to keep the relationships good. So I get why you're tweeting that.
That's actually huge right there. Right? The idea that like you should, like, it's all about, it goes back to access. These people want access to the next game release, the news, whatever it may be. And that's why some of these people are standing there protecting these relationships. And that's the underbelly to this whole thing is you have these people. Yeah. Oh, Blabs nailed it. Absolutely. 100%. Yep. But let's continue here.
But don't fucking get on a soapbox and a high horse and act like people aren't going to talk about this.
But Jackie, the first rule of games journalism is police other games journalism.
That's true.
It is the single most fucking annoying. Honestly, I could spend all morning watching people. It's like, get the over yourselves. My God, it is newsworthy.
Oh my God.
Guess what?
Shut the fuck up, dude. I'm sorry. Hearing him acting like this, saying this shit, fuck you, Adam Sessler. Dude, that's fucking rich coming from him. Like, oh, yeah, he might have a point, but fuck you, dude. I remember G4 and the fucking attitude that he was throwing around, acting like they were all high and mighty. Remember, like, him clapping when Frost was doing her shit? It's like, fuck off, dude.
Do you want to hear any more of it, or are you?
Well, dude, I don't like people acting high and mighty when you know that they're not, when they don't walk the walk. All right, that fucking pisses me off so much. All right, it's so frustrating. It's like, you're not legit, you're not authentic, you're just saying that because you know that people are gonna agree with it. It's the same. It's like, it's political grifters. It's like a politician's tactic. It's the same thing. They're saying all these fucking words that you're like, yeah, I want to hear that. Like, that's exactly what I want to hear. Awesome. Yeah, hell yeah, I'm agreeing with this. You know, people are like, Fetterman saying U.S. shouldn't sell U.S. steel to Japanese. I forget the name of the steel company in Japan, but I agree with him. And people are like, wow, I really love Fetterman now. And I'm like, what the fuck? Because he said one thing. He's still a fucking jackass. Like,
well, I agree with everything you said, and that, yes, he's still a jackass, but that doesn't mean that you can't, like, I'm not like, oh, team Sessler, but I think that there are points just because I don't agree with everything he says, there aren't things that I can't not agree with. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
sure.
Let's go and continue this last like 20
by
seconds.
all means.
Yeah,
by all means. Sure.
I love your passion though, Adam. This is great.
Yeah.
Like, it's newsworthy and it's really goddamn unfortunate. Everyone knows I love.
By the way, this is a guy who used to work in TV and he can't afford a good mic.
Well, listen how like passionate he's acting. I don't fucking believe it. I just don't believe him. It's bullshit. Where was this energy when G4 was still running and he was in charge of it and it was fucking failing, right? And he was protecting terrible takes from his employees. Fuck this guy. Go ahead.
I actually consider Ted Price a goddamn friend. But no, there's news there. There's tons of news there.
It's news. It's interesting. It's unfortunate.
Secondly, it's like, if you say, I feel the same way about the Harry Potter game at the beginning of the year. Is that, it's like, no, you don't get to, if you're going to say that you're going to pick and choose based upon what you think is morally a viable game or not, fuck you. That's ridiculous.
Right.
It's like the minute you start.
It's so rich coming from this guy, dude. Are you serious?
Let's listen to the last statement here.
Okay. That's ridiculous.
Right.
It's like the minute you start to say that you're making those decisions, you have stopped being a journalistic outlet for as far as like you're some weird advocacy group. And
that's so funny. Holy shit, listening to Adam Sessler of all people say those words. Wow.
I got to be honest. I didn't really think about it and like in that perspective until you brought that up, good. Right? Like the idea.
Dude, what did G4 become? Exactly what he's saying. Holy shit, that is fucking rich, dude. Wow, that was funny. Thank you for showing me that comedy. That was great.
Now he does have a point though, in that the second that you come in and say that you're no longer going to cover something because of a moral reason or whatever, you are absolutely an advocate group, and so you're no longer journalist, which we see all the time.
Sure. Was he looking in the mirror? Or, I mean,
he's just yelling at himself. He's got a mirror full.
Yeah. watching like G4. He's got like on his wall. It's just like the fall of G4, and he's just like screaming at it. Oh, we're on the podcast. Sorry, my bad.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, he's got a point. Sure. Yeah, of course. Right. But it's just like it's hard to focus on it when he's the one saying this shit. It's like, wow, you learned from experience, huh?
That's interesting. It's funny because when I brought this up, I was thinking like, they said he has some common sense right here. But then when you look at his track record, you're 100% right. You are right, Adam.
If he would have said in that rant, look, I know from experience. Look at what I did. Look what happened with G4. Look, you know what I mean? Like if he had some self-recognition, like where he's acknowledging his own faults so that he could come from a place of experience. No, he was coming like he knew better. Like let me give you these great points. There was no being humble and like acknowledging his own faults and the fact that he did it himself. Had he done that, I would have taken it completely different, but he didn't. It was 100%. I know what's right. I'm calling these fuckers out for doing this shit that he himself has done. So like, fuck that guy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. Love it. But to kind of put a bow on this, I have no problem with reporting. I hate the term reporting because we're not reporters. We're not journalists. All we're doing is talking about it. And we're doing what people who like this hobby do. They talk about things. It would be like, as pointed out by Jaffe in his Twitter post, if there's a trade in baseball or if there's whatever, if something happens in the world of, I don't know, cake making and you're a fan of cake making, you're going to talk about it. If you enjoy your hobby, it's natural to talk about things in that hobby. So it's crazy to think, man. Nice job, Adam. I love it. That's a really interesting perspective right there. Didn't even think about that, which is great. But what do you think about this? Leave us a comment down below. We read every single one of them. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button because you have found your home for common sense in the gaming and entertainment worlds.